Streaming from Oklahoma's own digital studio, this is Stephen Nehrenz with This Week in Weather.
Hey everyone, meteorologist Stephen Nehrenz here. Welcome again to another edition of This Week in Weather on this July 29th from the News on 6 digital studio. As always, greatly appreciate you joining me here each week as we get a little more in depth about the forecast ahead of us, kind of looking back at what we've had, especially with the heat of the last few weeks, and then looking forward to, guess what? Some heat relief after we get through a couple more really hot days. It's not often that we get to say August starts off with a cool down, but that's exactly what's ahead of us. So we're going to get into the details, the good news with that in just a few minutes. And by the way, going to have a guest join me for the first time here on This Week in Weather, Alan Crone, who is the weather guru genius for us here on 6 in the morning, is going to join me here in just a second as we kind of talk through what's ahead of us over the next several days. As I always start with on This Week in Weather, as these, of course, get posted to our News on 6 YouTube channel each week. If you've got questions and comments, suggestions of things you'd like to hear us discuss on This Week in Weather, whether it's local weather here or if it's something that's happening across the country that you're like, that's really interesting, I don't know what that is. Could you explain that a little better? And that's actually one thing that we're going to discuss today was kind of an interesting phenomenon that happens in the Midwest portions of the country during summertime. That's one of a few things we're going to discuss in a few minutes. But just an example, if you have something like that you'd like to hear us discuss on This Week in Weather, you know where to find me. My email address, Facebook page there on the screen, but also commenting on our videos that get posted to the News on 6 YouTube channel. I read those comments as well, and that kind of gives us an idea of interesting things you think you'd like us to discuss. All right, as we get into these last couple days of July, the beginning of August, like I said, some big changes are on the way after we get through some heat, and it's been a solid few weeks of this heat wave that Alan and I have been tracking. And I'll go ahead and bring in Alan Crone, we work together on 6 in the morning. First time I'm bringing in a guest here, so if I trip up over anything, apologies in advance. But Alan, how you doing?
I'm good, Stephen. Thanks for having me this morning.
Of course, and we'll more than likely do this more often as we go down the line here, and we've got time. That's the good thing is this time of year, the first. I joked about this, I think one of my recent episodes of This Week in Weather, I think it was last week, so I was saying this was like the first time that I had a chance to breathe and be like, hey, not much is happening, because it felt like every single week through April and May and June.
Storm.
Was like
rain.
Yeah, and it was like, hey, guess what? We broke another record. Hey, we broke another record. So last week is the first time for me to be like, okay, it's a little quieter, and start introducing guests. So appreciate you joining me this morning, Alan. So this month of July, of course, the last couple weeks has been solidly hot. I mean, I've been calling it a heat wave, but I would say normal heat wave, by July standards, like not extreme, at least, temperature-wise, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Obviously, we've had summers around here that it's just been absolutely miserable. You go back to 2011. After that really cold winter, 2011 was the big, summer season that we had 40-something days of, 100-degree heat. And really the last several years, I mean, it's been very uncomfortable for our summer seasons, but in terms of just major heat waves where it's day after day after day, that's not been the case. But the last couple of days, it's finally started to kind of show up, and it's because of a couple of things. But I know you're going to talk about it here. It's the ridge of high pressure that's kind of been settling across part of Oklahoma and Texas finally.
Yeah, and you can see the high temperatures on the screen here at calendars. I know it's a lot of numbers to look at, but the long and short of it is, the blue boxes, that's when we were at least a couple degrees below normal. Yellow boxes would be a couple degrees above normal. And then the gray boxes is where we were basically within about a degree of average. And you see a lot, basically the first half of the month, a lot of the blue. The second half of the month, it's been kind of the other way. But a lot of those gray boxes, which like I said earlier, is it's been hot, but normal hot, for lack of a better word. Obviously it's been muggy, I know. And you hear us talk about the heat index all the time, and that has been a major factor. And that's a big reason why, arguably the biggest reason why we haven't hit 100 yet this summer, is because of the humidity, as you've heard us discuss many times here on This Week in Weather and also on air, the copious amounts of rain that we've had from April, May, June, and the first half of July. And here's where we're headed. Again, no burying the lead here before we kind of discuss a few other things. recording this here on Tuesday, the 29th. We are forecasting 100 degrees for the first time this summer. If somehow we don't make it there and we stop short at 99, it looks even more likely that we'll get to 100 tomorrow, Wednesday. The last time Tulsa hit 100, almost a year ago, 358 days since we've hit 100 in Tulsa. The last time we did in 2024 was August 6th of 2024. But I will say, I was looking back on those stats last year. I had to remind myself that I had forgotten how hot September was last year. Last September, we got actually really close to hitting 100 after this. So, again, but it's been almost a full year since we finally hit, since we last hit 100 here in Tulsa. And like I said, I think today and tomorrow will be our first ones. I would be very happy if it's our only ones.
Right,
Of 2025. Not going to guarantee that. I know better than that. But as you'll see, as far as the reliefs heading our way, after today and Wednesday, it should hopefully be a little while, at least a week, before we approach that territory again. I'm just fine with that. I don't know about you.
No, I'm totally fine. Yeah. And one of the reasons why that we have not been able to do that, and you alluded to, is because of all the rain that we've had so far.
Yeah, and
for the year.
Yeah, yes. It's been. I was looking at our stats, the rainfall stats this morning. I didn't have the graphic in here because we've been showing it a lot. But since it's finally dried out the last couple of weeks, we've slightly fallen off the near record pace that we were on. We're still like in the top 5, something like that. Wettest, like January to July's on record. But yeah, that is a huge reason why. We talk about this on a lot, and you do, in particular in the mornings, why the trade-off has been, okay, the temperatures have been a little lower, but then the heat index goes way up, which we've felt in a lot of summers around here. And we have this really cool graphic that I hadn't shown on air before that I thought was a really good way of explaining. You talk about this in particular a lot, evapotranspiration, and you also explain it on air, but now we've got a little time to explain it in more detail as opposed to trying to squeeze it into a 3-minute weather segment.
Sure,
But this goes through the entire water cycle, so I'll just kind of play this out as we discuss getting to, when you say evapotranspiration, is putting that moisture back in the atmosphere and how we get there. I know the water cycle, I know you hopefully heard this in your science classes as you were in school about where we start. Evaporation, how we get into the water cycle, water transferred into the atmosphere through evaporation. Alan, I think we know where that leads next.
Yeah, it goes up to condensation. You start to see the clouds building up. So dry air heats and cools efficiently. I've talked about dry air for years and years, especially in the wintertime and the summertime. That's why, like in western Oklahoma, they're not going to have the heat index that we'll have here in the eastern part of the state. They have drier air. But moist air is not an efficient, heating cooling process. It takes a while. So when that happens, the evapotranspiration rates start to kick in. It puts moisture back into the atmosphere. It goes up to condensation, leads to cloud formation. Then you reach a certain convective temperature, or a storm system arrives. You have lift in the atmosphere. You got a frontal boundary approaching. You have all kinds of different things. And then you start to see showers, storms developing, and that's precipitation. So basically, we're just drawing a cycle. It's the water cycle. It's water vapor changing its state. So it's falling back down. It gets into the rivers. It gets into the green. And we talk a lot about this as well, Stephen, on the morning show. Green country is exceptionally green this summer. And that's another reason why that it also, pulls against the potential temperature that we would normally see under certain circumstances, especially when we have a ridge. There's ways to measure the ridge of high pressure.
Yep.
And especially when we have a ridge that's at 594, 100 meters, 594, when it's really on top of us, we would normally see 100-degree plus temperatures. But because of this process that you're showing here, evapotranspiration of the green vegetation, plus the moisture content just to begin with, we have tropical-like moisture, dew points in the 70s before it tries to mix down. Maybe you can talk a little bit about mixing down in just a second, but then it goes back up and it starts all over again. Goes to evapotranspiration, condensation, precipitation. It just cycles over and over.
Right. So I thought this was a perfect way of describing that. And like you said, It's muggy either way. I mean, it's just been a muggy summer, regardless of the evapotranspiration that we've had happening here. But here it is. I mean, that like you said, it's an entire cycle. We go from this, and then we go back to evaporation and condensation, precipitation, evapotranspiration. It's called the water cycle for a reason. But I thought this was I thought a good way of illustrating when we talk about this and how it's continued to strongly lend to the muggy days we've had and keeping our temperatures, the actual thermometer reading below 100 degrees. Well, this is right here. This is a big reason why. One more thing. Now, this is kind of, we're going off the beaten path here slightly, Alan. We don't have this.
Thankfully.
Thankfully, we do not have this here in green country, not like they have in the Midwest. I'll come back down for just a second. I did have, I've had some questions about this before, and actually one of our producers on the morning show, I was asking about like, hey, are there, some things that you would like to discuss? And Hannah, our producer, 9 producer, actually said, yeah, I've heard about this thing called corn sweats. What is that? Is that real? Because I know it sounds made up, and I was like, actually.
Kind of is.
That's a very real thing. I know it's a very odd sounding thing. And again, it's not something that we really have here in the Midwest, in Iowa in particular. This is a very real thing. And it's the same general sort of process we were just talking about, evapotranspiration, but in a maybe slightly more heightened, even more heightened
it's
sense.
in fourth gear. It's in high gear.
Yeah, so this is what that is. So corn sweats, if you ever hear that term, it is a real thing. I say it's a real thing. It's a real term. What they're referring to is this. That evapotranspiration that we just discussed, that we deal with around here all the time with the green vegetation, it's essentially what they're having in Iowa, where they have just the massive, miles and miles of cornfields, right? They're having that evapotranspiration that's happening with those cornfields that's also being transported by the wind that's moving through there. But it can create even more localized, higher impacts than we even see here. I mean, we've been having dew points in the 70s, like all summer, basically, at times into the upper 70s. But in these areas, I mean, they get dew points in the 80s, which is just like out of control, gross humidity.
Yeah, and every once in a while, when we get a dew point that's 78 or 79, and occasionally, once every couple of years, we might see an 80-degree dew point, across extreme east central Oklahoma. I mean, when you combine the temperature and, the heat index, I mean, it just goes through the roof on that type of thing there.
Yeah, I mean, they have heat index of like 115, 120, which, I mean, like you said, we've had some summers here in the last few years that we've had heat index over 120, which is just like off the charts horrible. But that's the kind of stuff that they can have in the Midwest with that type of a setup. So I thought I'd throw that in because I had Hannah asked about it, and I was like, yeah, it's a real. It sounds made up, I know, but it's a real thing that thankfully we don't really deal with. We've got enough humidity to deal with around here.
Yeah, miles and miles and miles of corn.
Well, yeah, so we don't need that, but that is something that they deal with in the Midwest. But I threw it in because it goes along the same lines of the evapotranspiration. The summertime, putting the moisture, summertime, all the rainfall moisture back up into the atmosphere. Same general process that we've been dealing with here. So that's why I kind of wanted to throw it in. Now here's where we're headed over the next few days, where we are right now. The heat dome, we've been tracking it all summer, and it's been, it never sits in one place, just technically. It's always moving a little bit, but through the summer it's been kind of off to our west, kind of off to our east, off to our southeast, which, by the way, I mentioned off to our east. Some of the southeast and the northeast United States has reasonably had even worse heat than we've had at points this summer because they've been under the heat dome more than we have. But right now, it is right on top of us. So this is why the hottest days of the year are upon us, in particular today and tomorrow. That the mid to upper level ridge of high pressure settles in. It's that sinking motion above our heads, which means it does not help promote thunderstorm development. All the storms kind of go around that ridge, and just adds another layer of being able to crank up the heat. So that's why we're expecting the 100-degree readings today and tomorrow. In particular, if those dew points mix out a little bit, Alan was talking about this earlier, that our dew points have been commonly in the 70s more or less, I say every day, most days this summer. But if they can mix down a little more into the 60s, which is still humid but not as muggy, then that's going to more than likely push us into 100-degree readings today and tomorrow, which is what we're expecting. But just as the heat dome is dominating for the first time this summer, here's where we're headed by the end of the week, Alan. Like I said, just as August begins on Friday, this is not exactly what you would expect to see on August 1st, is northwest flow returning.
No, this is what you typically see June 1st. The first couple of weeks in June. It's very common that the ridge shows up early June. It kind of parks out west for about 3 weeks, and we create the northwest flow, and you get what's called MCS season. This is called convective systems, these big storm systems that develop way up north, and they drive that little highway, that upper airflow. You see that northwest flow, you see where the jet stream is located right now, that will actually start to drop a little bit closer to our area as we get into late Friday and Saturday. The majority of the stronger flow is still going to stay north. But in June, that thing is just cranking out these MCSs, several days in a row. And there's been some actually. In fact, we just had a big one that rolled through part of Iowa and Minnesota and portions of the Dakotas, last night. We're posting this on Tuesday morning here, but last night they had one of those big MCS, kind of like our Father's Day storm they had there. Well, anyway, the ridge now is going to go out west, so it theoretically opens the gate. It opens the door that we can have at least a storm system or two in a front, and that's what we're anticipating, Stephen, is that we'll have at least a front that tries to get closer to us by late Wednesday night and Thursday. And here's the inside baseball on that. The more showers and storms that can develop along and behind the front up in the central high plain states will have an opportunity to push that front a little bit more southward than normally would be anticipated for this time of the year. So this is not going to be the mother of all cold fronts, but it should, the way that the data suggests, it should bring some notable changes. Thursday, it'll be in the northern sections, not necessarily in southern Oklahoma, but by Friday through the weekend, I think a lot of us will probably be able to feel the difference.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's not like we're going from 100 to 50 or something like that. It's not that, that doesn't happen this time of year. But a good cold front, I'd say by August standards, a good cold front, like you said, I do this a lot. I know you do. Most of us do. When a front like this does show up this time of year, you're kind of like, okay, I don't want to get too over the top with how much it's going to cool down, because it just usually does. Usually fronts this time of year that make it here, they're kind of they're weak, they're touch and go. We cool down a little bit.
Well, when you hear the term cold front, the expectation, is like
cold.
Okay, cold. Not the case. Not as hot front.
Yeah.
And then eventually not as muggy front as well.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah. But having said that, this front, as we get closer and closer, when you're a week and a half out, we kind of use caution, because it's like, okay, yeah, that looks great, but let's see how it looks a week from now. We're getting closer and closer in. It still looks pretty good, again, by summer, by early August standards. So I think it will make a noticeable difference as early as Thursday from Tulsa to the north, and then southeastern Oklahoma. It might take you an extra day to feel that cool down at the end of the week. But by summertime standards, even if it's just for a few days, it's nice to break up the heat
we'll
wave.
take that, right? We get Friday, Saturday, and Sunday out of this deal, and maybe even a day or two next week. But then the data suggesting that even the pattern probably after that, by the middle to the end of next week, will shift again, and that ridge is going to migrate a little closer back into our area. So you can see Steven's got this graphic loaded up here for what the anticipation is for the high temperature, the departure from our normal high. It gets even better for Friday and Saturday, and kind of starts to slowly climb back up and get closer into normal by the middle of next week.
Yeah, but it's, this time of year, I don't get to show we don't usually have the blue bars on the graphic that much. That's this true. Time of year, especially when it's that far below what's considered normal high for this time of year for Tulsa is about 95 for the end of July and the first week or two of August. And you can tell where we head by Friday, Saturday. 10 degrees below the seasonal normal would be mid-80s on Friday with humidity values a little bit lower as well. So that's, like I said, that's a real treat, all things considered. And I will say also, this is just kind of coming to my mind right now, we had through the first half of the summer, June and early July, below normal temperatures pretty frequently, but that also came with 3 feet of rain. For lack of it,
tons of moisture.
Tons of rain. Right. And so we had a lot of those cooler days, but they were also soggy days, right? And so this would be, there are some shower and storm chances with this front, but these would just, these could be cooler days that aren't necessarily like washout days, like some of those days that we had in May and June and even early July, which again is also great. So that's kind of where you can see the departure from normal. Here are some of the actual numbers to kind of visualize what that should look like. Again, today, Tuesday, very hot. Wednesday, very hot. Thursday here in Tulsa, we're kind of right in between the cooler and the hotter, battle zone as the front pushes south. So I point that out to say there's a possibility that Thursday ends up a little cooler in Tulsa than what I've got on the map right here. Some of the forecast data is saying, no, Thursday cools us down pretty nicely, but again, we're still, with a summer cold front, there's the chance that it moves in a little slower than what the models think. And like you said, Al, especially if there's not just a ton of showers and storms with the front, it could move in and kind of put the brakes on Thursday. We do think, Alan has mentioned this on air a lot, that I think that Thursday, if you're north of Tulsa, I think you're going to feel pretty good. Bartlesville, Coffeyville. If you're south around McAllister, Thursday's probably still going to be pretty hot and sticky.
And that's the expectation. That's the expectation also, that when, again, people are getting hit. There's a cold front coming on Thursday, and folks in southern Oklahoma are going to walk outside and go, wait a minute.
Right.
It's not here yet.
Yeah.
And that's the case, because even southern Oklahoma will still have heat indices that will go pretty close to 105. I think our friends at the Weather Service will probably issue a heat advisory for at least a couple of counties in southern Oklahoma Thursday, if not even along the I-40 corridor, but at least Highway 270 corridor south, where it's still going to be flat out muggy.
Yeah, but again, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there will be, for your weekend plans, some scattered shower and storm chances, kind of, off and on, intermittent. As of the moment, it doesn't look extremely widespread, and hopefully not terribly disruptive for your outdoor plans this weekend. If you're probably going to want to make some when you're seeing highs in the 80s, Friday and Saturday in particular. Just be aware that there will be some chances for some scattered showers and storms. It should be kind of scattered variety. We're not seeing, at least as of now, too many major signs of like big complexes of storms sweeping through. Now, early next week, that might change.
That's different. Right.
Yeah, early that northwest flow that Al and I were discussing a little while ago, that pattern's still hanging on at the start of next week, and there have been signs that we get towards, say, like next Monday, next Tuesday, that we might have some of those MCSs, those big complexes of storms that we would typically have in like June. We may get a couple of those early next week. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. That's still several days out. But I point that out and say this weekend, those scattered shower and storm chances, I think, should be a little more of the scattered variety with the cooler conditions for at least the start of August. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, should, after we get through the middle of the week. I'm not saying that ends the hundreds for the summer. That would not be a wise thing for me to say, because we all know.
In fact, it probably comes back, at least the threat of that, by the end of next week. But again, the thing that's going to work against it is the green, the vegetation, the moisture content in the atmosphere. I mean, it would really have to, high pressure get even stronger to really overcome some of that. So. Yeah,
and then if it rains another couple inches in some spots this weekend or next week, it could just add to that evapotranspiration all over again. So the long and short of it is today and tomorrow, Tuesday and Wednesday, hot, 100-degree weather seems pretty likely. And then we get this cool down for the end of the week, into the weekend, and you want to enjoy it because, as Alan mentioned, more than likely we get towards the end of next week and beyond, the heat will come back at us. Triple digits could come back at us, which you would frankly expect as we get into what would be like past the first few days of August into the second week of August. It's called the dog days of summer for a reason, from like what from like mid to late July through mid-August is typically our hottest period of the entire year. So, and that will more than likely rear its head again after this late week and weekend cool down. But, we'll deal with that.
That's down the road.
We'll deal with that when it comes. So that is some good news. We don't often get to have, good news temperature-wise this time of year, but that's what's coming our way once we get through a very hot Tuesday, a very hot Wednesday. Well, again, I think that's all we've got for this week in weather. You can always find us. This gets posted on our News on 6 YouTube channel. And like I said, I've been loving the feedback we've been getting so far. Continue to give us that feedback here and let us know what you'd like to hear as we do this on a weekly basis. You know where to find us again on the channel, on the YouTube channel, and then also on my Facebook page and email and everything else as well. So again, that's it for this week weather. Alan, thanks for joining me. This was nice to have someone to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, of course. And like I said, we'll hopefully do more of this as we go down the line. And I've been starting to kind of think through some ideas, maybe some interview guests, weather folks that I can from outside the station.
I can't wait, honestly, until we get closer into football season. So that way we can combine your passion for weather and football, and we can talk about football forecasts.
True.
For all these big football games that are coming up.
No, you're right. Once we get into football season, these segments might be like an hour long because I'll get into the forecast and then start talking about like I'm an OU grad, so I'll probably spiral out of control into some OU talk and high school TU and OSU and high school football, and these segments will be like an hour long, and the producers will be like, okay, wrap it up. See, now you got me thinking about that. So I'm excited about that as we head into fall. All right, well, Alan, thanks for joining me, and everyone, thanks for joining us for this week in weather. We'll see you next week. Be good to each other, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching this Oklahoma's own digital studio live stream from the Bob Mills Weather Center. Stay with News on 6 online and on television anytime for the latest weather updates to keep you safe and informed.